"We don't have room for you, Mom." Grayson said it like he was reading a grocery list. Not angry, not cruel, just finished. His voice had that clipped tone he used in work calls, the one that made it clear this wasn't a conversation. It was a decision. Peyton stood behind him, near the staircase, arms folded, her face blank and unreadable. She didn't speak, but she didn't need to. The message was already signed in bold. I didn't ask questions. I didn't defend myself. I just looked at my son, the boy I'd raised through night shifts, the boy who once clung to my hip when he scraped his knee, and nodded. "All right," I said. I turned toward the hallway and walked back to the downstairs suite, if that's what you could even call it. Technically, it had 4 walls and a door. But the bed was narrow. The window faced a retaining wall, and the half bath had no shower. Just a mirror too high for me to use without standing on tiptoe. The closet was a coat rack in the corner. I'd told myself that didn't matter when I first moved in. After all, I wasn't here for luxury. I was here to help. I sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, just long enough to let my knees stop shaking. Then I stood, opened the single drawer I had, and started packing. It didn't take long. A few folded sweaters, the same 3 pairs of jeans I rotated through each week, my toothbrush, the paperback I never finished, and the photo of Ellis, still in its simple wooden frame. I wrapped the frame in one of my cardigans and tucked it carefully inside the suitcase. I didn't bother with the kitchen. Nothing in there was mine. Not the mugs, not the olive oil, not even the coffee maker I'd bought them 2 Christmases ago. I had no place in that space anymore. At the bottom of my suitcase, I reached past the folded quilt and found it flat, heavy red, the folder. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what it held: the deed, the bank statement, the co-ownership contract Grayson asked me to sign when the mortgage wouldn't come through without a stronger application. At the time, I hadn't hesitated. I wanted to help him. I trusted him. Back then, he kissed my cheek and said, "You'll always have a home with us." Now he couldn't even look me in the eye when he asked me to leave. I zipped the suitcase, pulled on my coat, and wheeled it slowly to the front door. Grayson was no longer there. Neither was Peyton. I considered saying goodbye, but I realized I didn't owe them that. Not anymore. Outside, the wind had picked up. I stood under the porch light and ordered a cab, gripping the handle of my suitcase like it might float away without me. When the car arrived, I climbed in without turning back. The driver didn't speak much, which I appreciated. I told him the name of a small motel I'd passed twice, before one that always had a flickering vacancy sign and a vending machine out front. I had no plan, no timeline, no one waiting on the other end. But I had the folder. And somewhere inside, a part of me knew I hadn't walked away with nothing. I had walked away with just enough. The day I moved in, it rained just hard enough to make the driveway slick. Grayson offered to help with my suitcase, but I waved him off. It wasn't heavy, just old. The wheels wobbled a little on the pavement. The handle stuck halfway. But I preferred to manage it myself. It was one of the last things Ellis and I bought together before his diagnosis. That suitcase had seen every trip we ever took: birthdays in Asheville, weekend drives to Savannah, 2 weddings, and 1 funeral. Peyton opened the front door before we reached it and smiled like someone remembering to be polite. "We're so glad to have you," she said. Her arms were crossed. Her eyes scanning the suitcase, the folded quilt in my hands, the framed photo tucked under my arm. "Let me show you your space." They'd bought the house 3 months earlier, a 4-bedroom just outside Charlotte. Big kitchen, neutral paint gray tile that echoed when you walked. It was clean, curated like something out of a real estate brochure. The kind of house where nothing smelled like dinner. The kind of house that had throw pillows but no books. Grayson had called me after the bank denied their loan. They were just $180 short. He didn't ask me for it. He didn't have to. I knew what Ellis would have done. I wired the full amount the next morning, not a second thought. It's your future, I told him. It's our family's future. When the confirmation came through, Peyton called me crying. We'll never forget this, Callista. You'll always have a home here. Always. They even let me pick out the paint color for the guest suite. I chose a soft cream, neutral, like the rest of the house. I didn't want to intrude. The room was smaller than I expected. A twin bed pushed into the corner, a metal rack for hanging clothes, a half bath across the hall. No shower, no closet. But it had a window. That was enough. I laid the quilt on the bed, first faded blue hand-stitched by Ellis's mother. One side had a tiny burn mark from a candle I'd knocked over during a storm. I used to joke that the scar gave it personality. I folded it down over the edge of the bed and placed the photo on the windowsill. Ellis grinning beside our old mailbox, holding up a letter from Grayson's college. He was so proud that day. Peyton helped me set up the Wi-Fi password. Grayson brought coffee to my room the first 2 mornings. We even had dinner together that first Friday. Chicken and roasted potatoes. They asked me questions. They laughed at my stories. It felt warm, familiar. But that warmth didn't last. By week 3, I was making my own dinners. They stopped knocking. Peyton started locking the fridge upstairs. My Netflix account stopped working. When I asked about it, Grayson said he'd look into it. He never did. Still, I stayed quiet, because I told myself the same thing every night as I pulled the quilt up under my chin, as I looked at Ellis's picture and waited for sleep. This is temporary. I didn't expect them to worship me. I didn't need attention. I just wanted to be allowed to exist in the home I helped build. That night in the motel, as I unfolded the quilt over the stiff motel sheets, I caught my own reflection in the window. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like a guest. The first week I told myself the room just needed a little warmth. Maybe a plant by the window, a rug to soften the tile. I moved the twin bed away from the wall and added a second pillow from the upstairs linen closet. It sagged a little, but it filled the space. There was no closet, just a rolling rack that leaned if you hung more than 5 shirts. My shoes stayed lined up under the bed, the rest folded into the bottom of my suitcase. The half bath across the hall was technically mine, but it didn't have a shower, only a sink and a toilet, both of which groaned when used. If I wanted a real shower, I had to wait until no one was using the main one upstairs. I started going early before anyone else woke up, towel in hand, stepping lightly so the floorboards wouldn't creak. I didn't mind, at least not at first. It felt good just to be near people again, to hear life happening around me, footsteps above my head, cabinets opening, someone laughing in the kitchen even if I wasn't part of the conversation. I hadn't lived with anyone since Ellis died. The silence in that old apartment had grown thick like insulation. This house, however cold, was full of reminders that I hadn't disappeared completely. One morning, I passed Grayson in the hallway. He was holding his phone to his ear, nodding. I said good morning, and he smiled, quick, distracted. I stepped out of his way. Later that day, I cleaned the downstairs powder room without being asked. I refolded the throw blankets in the living room. I wiped the counters. No one said anything, but I told myself that meant it was appreciated. Peyton started meal prepping on Sundays. Tupperware lined every shelf of the fridge upstairs. She taped a label across the door, "Do not move items." When I asked if I could store some yogurt up there, she said, "The downstairs mini fridge is just for you. It keeps things simple." I nodded and thanked her. The mini fridge was barely large enough for a carton of milk and a pack of eggs. I started buying peanut butter and crackers just to avoid asking again. Some nights I could hear them through the ceiling, talking, sometimes laughing. Other times I caught bits of whispered arguments. I didn't try to eavesdrop. I just stayed quiet, laying still under my quilt, hands crossed over my stomach like I was waiting for something, though I couldn't say what. I read through 3 novels in as many weeks, took walks around the neighborhood, sat on the back porch when no one else was home. The neighbors waved sometimes. One asked if I was Peyton's aunt. I smiled and said, "Just family," and let it hang there. Grayson didn't bring me coffee anymore. Peyton stopped coming downstairs altogether. I didn't mind. I didn't want to be a burden. I was just glad to hear life, even if it didn't include me. Still, the echoes started to wear thin. The footsteps weren't comforting anymore. They were reminders. Reminders that I was beneath them, literally and otherwise. Reminders that I had carved out a life to support theirs, only to end up watching it all from the quietest room in the house. That day, I reached for the framed photo on the windowsill. Ellis, frozen in that moment of pride and joy. I held it in my lap and whispered, "You wouldn't believe what it's become." He didn't answer, of course. But the silence did. The first time I noticed the padlock, I thought it was a mistake. A leftover from moving day, maybe something they'd used to keep cleaning supplies safe from the dog they briefly considered adopting. But there it was, wrapped around the handles of the upstairs refrigerator. A metal clasp secured with a small silver combination lock. New. Intentional. I stood in front of it holding a carton of eggs I'd just bought. Peyton walked in behind me, AirPods in gym bag over her shoulder. She glanced at the eggs, then at me, and smiled, like she'd caught a child with their hand in the cookie jar. "Oh," she said, pulling out a protein shake from the side cooler. "Yeah, that's just for meal prepping now. We're trying to stay super organized. The downstairs fridge is easier for you anyway, right?" She didn't wait for an answer, just walked out sipping through her straw. I carried the eggs back down with both hands, trying not to let them rattle. A few days later, the Wi-Fi cut out. I thought it was a service issue. I waited. Reset the router. Checked the cables. When I asked Grayson, he said, "Oh yeah, we moved the modem to the office upstairs. Peyton needed faster upload speeds. You can still get the signal right." I couldn't. My shows wouldn't load. The emails I sent to the book club bounced. When I mentioned it again, he offered to look, but never did. I stopped asking. At dinner one night, one of the rare ones we still had together, I made a comment about a documentary I'd been trying to finish. Peyton laughed and said, "She's so analog. Everything has to buffer or download or pause. It's cute, though. Like a human time capsule." Grayson laughed too, but didn't look at me. It became a pattern, a steady drip of small exclusions. The charger that disappeared from the hallway, the family calendar moved to a private app, the grocery list that no longer sat on the counter. I still cooked sometimes, still folded dish towels neatly, still ran the vacuum when they were at work. No one asked me to, but no one thanked me either. One afternoon, I opened the downstairs fridge and found my milk bottle had been emptied and refilled with water. The label was torn. My name, written in marker, had been rubbed off. I sat down on the edge of my bed and stared at the floor. It wasn't about the milk. It never was. These weren't accidents. These were quiet messages deliberately muted. "You don't belong. You're extra. You're in the way." I thought of Ellis then, how he used to say, "It's not always the words, Cal. It's the absence of them." I reached for my notebook and drew a small square in the corner of the page. Then I shaded it in. No title, no date. Just dark ink filling a box. A visual reminder that something had shifted. And the worst part wasn't that I was being shut out. It was how polite they were about it. Polite enough that I couldn't scream. Polite enough that if I did, I'd look like the problem. So I stayed quiet. I folded the towel. I watered the houseplants. I put the milk back in the fridge. And I waited. I wasn't trying to listen. I was on my way to the kitchen to make tea. The good kind, the one I kept hidden in a tin behind the baking sheets, because Peyton once called it bitter grandma brew. It was too early for them to be up. The hallway was still dim. I moved slowly, slippers quiet on the tile, and then I heard him. She won't leave if we keep being nice. Grayson's voice. Low, sharper than usual. The kind of voice he used when he thought no one was watching. I froze. Peyton's reply came a second later, clipped and confident. She won't sign her share over unless she feels unwanted. Make it uncomfortable. She'll leave herself. There was a pause long enough for me to press my back against the wall near the pantry, staring at the wallpaper I'd helped pick out 6 days earlier. Grayson again, I don't want to fight with her. She's not a bad person. You don't need to fight, Peyton said flatly. You just need to make space. They were talking about the house. About me. I don't remember walking back to my room. I only remember standing by the window, watching the neighbors' dog nose around their mailbox. My fingers were still clenched around the empty mug. That evening, I made chicken Alfredo from scratch, Grayson's favorite. I used real cream-chopped fresh parsley, toasted the bread until it was golden. I set the table, lit the tiny candle in the center, the one Peyton had moved to the back of the cabinet last month. They didn't come down. At 7:20, I texted Grayson dinner's ready. At 7:41, I heard Peyton's footsteps upstairs, followed by her voice through the vent above the laundry nook. I already ate. Grayson's voice muffled. I've got calls. I sat down at the table and served myself a plate. 1 scoop of pasta. 1 piece of bread. I didn't cry. I didn't storm upstairs. I just ate slowly, listening to the house. Afterward, I rinsed the dishes and packed up the leftovers into a small container, marked it with the date, and placed it in the mini fridge downstairs. Then I pulled out the red folder from the drawer under my bed and laid it on top of the quilt. I didn't open it. I didn't need to see the signature lines again to know what they meant. They didn't want a guest anymore. They wanted a signature. They wanted me out so they could raise their child in a nursery with gray walls and wooden blocks that matched the coffee table. The same coffee table I'd helped pay for. I sat with the folder on my lap for an hour before I put it back. It wasn't that I was hurt. It was that I'd finally understood what was happening. And for the first time, I stopped hoping it would get better, because they weren't trying to fix anything. They were building a life that didn't include me. I just wasn't supposed to notice. The next morning, I made a list. Not of names. Not of complaints. Just things I'd stopped doing. Laundry. Cooking. Buying groceries. Smiling through tight silence. And at the very bottom, I added one more. Stop pretending this is home. I made it exactly how he liked it. Garlic sautéed, first not too brown. Real cream, not the light version Peyton preferred. Grated Parmesan, not pre-shredded, not powdered. I even remembered to leave out the mushrooms. Grayson hated the texture, said they felt like slugs in his mouth even as a teenager. I stirred slowly, the wooden spoon, worn smooth from years of family dinners, holiday meals, late-night leftovers, warmed on the stove. It was the same spoon I used when he had mono at 15 and couldn't swallow anything but soft pasta. The same one I packed in the box when I left our old house after Ellis passed, when I moved into that quiet apartment and told myself I could handle being alone. But tonight wasn't supposed to feel like that. I set the table upstairs with 3 plates. I used the good dishes, the ones with the blue rim Grayson always said looked like the sea. I poured water into the tall glasses, folded the napkins like I used to when his friends came over from school. It was a habit, really, a kind of muscle memory my hands still knew how to do without asking permission. At 7 sharp, I called up the stairs. Dinner's ready. Nothing. I waited. I turned the burner low, kept the sauce warm, adjusted the candle in the center of the table to make it look just a little more welcoming. By 7:15, no one had come down. At 7:30, I served myself a plate. Just one. At 7:45, I sat alone in the chair closest to the window and started eating. I didn't rush. I cut the chicken, slowly, chewed carefully. Tried to ignore how loud the house felt when no one was speaking. No footsteps, No doors opening. Not even the hum of the television upstairs. Just the sound of my fork against ceramic and the clink of my own glass when I reached for it. I thought about his 5th birthday when he cried because the bakery gave us the wrong cake, and I stayed up until midnight making a new one shaped like a soccer ball. I thought about the time he broke his wrist at recess and wouldn't let the nurse wrap it until I got there. I thought about the tooth he lost at the state fair. The fever that scared us both at 2 a.m. The graduation speech I never saw, because I was behind the camera making sure we had it on film. And now I was here, eating Alfredo by myself at a table I wasn't invited to anymore. I finished my meal, scraped the plate clean, and stood up. I cleared the other 2 place settings without a word, wrapped the leftover pasta tightly in foil, and placed it in the fridge downstairs. I wiped the counter until it shone, blew out the candle, and turned off the light. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my hands. They still smelled like garlic and soap. My fingers curled against my palm, a reflex I hadn't felt in years. The quiet didn't hurt tonight. It just settled, heavy and certain. Whatever I thought I had left here, whatever role I thought I still played, it wasn't mine anymore. I reached for the same notebook from the night before and wrote one sentence at the top of a blank page. You raised him, but you weren't invited. It was a Tuesday morning. The sun hadn't even touched the back windows yet. I was standing at the sink, rinsing strawberries the kind Peyton liked with her protein shakes when I heard her footsteps behind me. Linda, she said, voice even, folded arms firm against her chest. We think it's time you looked for something more permanent. Just your own space, you know. For your comfort. For ours. She delivered it, like a dentist telling you there was a cavity. Not cruel, just procedural. I turned off the faucet. Grayson entered a moment later, barefoot coffee in hand, blinking like he'd just woken up. He didn't look at me. He didn't even pause. We don't have space for you anymore, Mom, he said, setting his mug on the island like we were talking about expired milk. Just like that. No build-up, no discussion, no softening. I reached for the dish towel, dried my hands slowly. My heart wasn't racing. My stomach didn't turn. There was nothing sharp inside me, just clarity. This wasn't a fight. It was a filing. I turned to face them both. Peyton looked almost relieved. Grayson's face was blank. There was no shame, no hesitation, just routine. I smiled. Not wide, not fake, just still. Okay, I said. Peyton blinked. Grayson nodded, like he'd just finished some overdue task. Thanks, Mom, he muttered. Already. Turning back toward the hallway. I didn't say anything else. I didn't ask where they thought I should go or how soon they wanted me gone. I didn't ask if this decision had been made days ago, weeks even. I just walked downstairs. My room looked the same as it had that first day. Too clean, too small, too temporary. The quilt was folded. The framed photo of Ellis still rested on the windowsill, eyes fixed forever on a version of our son that didn't exist anymore. I opened the suitcase. It still had the scent of old cedar from our last trip to Charleston, tucked beneath the fabric lining. I started folding my clothes neatly, deliberately, each one smaller than I remembered. I packed my toiletries, my books, the sweater with the button missing. I placed the photo in the middle of the suitcase, wrapped in a towel, and then slowly I pulled the red folder from beneath the bed. The weight of it felt different now, not heavy, not burdensome, just solid, present, real. I sat with it on my lap for a moment, listening to the muffled sound of footsteps above me, the faint clink of a spoon against ceramic. Life moving on without me, or maybe because of it. I zipped the suitcase shut, and for the first time in weeks, I felt still. They wanted me gone, and I would give them exactly that, but not in the way they expected. I hadn't opened it in months, not since the day I signed it. The folder was slightly frayed at the corners now, the edges soft from being handled just enough to remind me it existed. I kept it under the quilt near the foot of the bed, between two sweaters I never wore. It was the only part of the house that truly belonged to me. I sat cross-legged on the bed, my suitcase zipped beside me, and clicked the metal clasp open. Inside the papers were exactly where I left them, neatly stacked, clipped and sealed in a plastic sleeve like they were something sacred. I pulled out the deed first. 2 names, Grayson Carter, Callista Rowan. His was listed first, but the percentage beside it was clear, 51%. Mine was 49%. I remembered signing it. The banker had offered us matching pens. Grayson smiled and squeezed my shoulder when the ink dried. "We're a team, Mom," he said. "This house is just as much yours." And I believed him. Of course I did. What reason would I have not to? The second page was the transfer slip from the life insurance payout. $180,000 wired from the account I'd shared with Ellis for 34 years. The money had landed in Grayson's account the morning after we talked, before a single box had been moved, before a single wall had been painted. Back then, it had felt like a gesture of love. Now, it looked like evidence. I flipped through the documents, slowly tracing the typed letters with my finger. Every line reminded me of something I had contributed. Not just money, but presence, time, trust. All of it recorded in tidy paragraphs and signatures notarized in blue ink. They had forgotten. They had acted like I was a guest. But I wasn't. I was part of the foundation. Not in sentiment, but in structure. I folded the papers carefully and slid them back into the sleeve, back into the folder. Then I took a blank sheet from my notebook and wrote down 3 names, my lawyer, my bank, and the lender's name from the original paperwork, just in case. I wasn't planning anything yet. I wasn't ready for that, but I wasn't powerless either. They thought asking me to leave was the final move. They didn't know I'd already played mine. I placed the folder in the center of my suitcase, zipped it shut, and stood. It was time to call the cab. The clerk didn't ask questions, just slid the clipboard across the counter and said, "1 bed or 2," without looking up. I gave him a name that wasn't quite mine, Callie Rowan, and paid in cash. 3 nights, no housekeeping, no calls, no ID required. Motel room 5B was exactly what I expected. Faded curtains. A lamp that flickered if you breathed too hard. The air conditioner groaned with every cycle like it was remembering how to work. The carpet smelled faintly of fried onions and bleach. But the lock on the door clicked tight, and the sheets were clean. That was enough. I placed my suitcase beside the bed, unzipped it just enough to pull out the folder, then set it on my lap like a shield. I sat that way for 20 minutes, still upright elbows pressed into my knees. It wasn't fear I felt. It was confirmation. They'd pushed me out of the house thinking I was disposable. They thought I'd fade, maybe find a couch to sleep on, maybe beg them for a timeline or a second chance. They hadn't even asked if I had somewhere to go. But I did. I had this room. I had my name on that deed, and I had silence on my side. I placed the folder gently under the pillow, then changed into the old cotton pajamas I'd packed without thinking. They smelled faintly of the laundry room back home, lavender detergent, and something else. Something duller. I couldn't place it, but it lingered. The motel bed creaked when I climbed in, every movement drawing out a sound like tired wood. I lay back against the pillow and placed the folder across my chest, arms crossed over it like armor. It wasn't comfort I needed. It was security. No phone calls, no texts. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't reach for a book. I didn't even open the curtains to see the parking lot or the road beyond it. I didn't want to be anywhere else. This room, this moment, this silence, it was mine. No one knew I was here. No one could find me without looking. And they wouldn't look, not yet. because they didn't know what they'd lost. I closed my eyes and counted my breath. 5 seconds in. 7 seconds out. It was something Ellis used to do when stress wrapped itself too tightly around his chest. He taught me during one of his last hospital stays. I hadn't used it in years. By the 7th breath, my fingers had relaxed around the folder. By the 10th, I stopped waiting for the knock on the door that wasn't coming. I fell asleep like that, on top of the covers, fully dressed, holding the evidence of everything I still owned. And when morning came, I didn't feel broken. I felt ready. Brad's voice was calm, but clipped. Polite in the way people are when they expect a reaction. Your son took out a $95,000 business loan using the house as collateral. Payments haven't been made in months. We've sent multiple notices, but haven't received a response. I held the phone steady. And now, if the balance isn't addressed, we'll begin foreclosure proceedings this Friday. Since you're listed as a co-owner, we're required to notify you. There it was. I didn't ask why Grayson hadn't told me. I already knew. He thought I wouldn't find out. He thought if he just smiled enough, if Peyton stayed sweet long enough, I'd fade out quietly and take my half with me. No questions, no conditions. He hadn't expected the lender to call. He certainly hadn't expected me to answer. I'd like you to send me the paperwork, I said. Brad hesitated. Of course, I'll email it now. The moment I hung up, I didn't move. I sat still in the motel chair, with the phone pressed between my palms and the weight of the words settling in the room like smoke. He used the house I helped buy, to start a business he never mentioned. A risk he never asked about, and now that risk had collapsed. I opened my laptop. 5 new emails waited. 4 from the lender. 1 from an unknown address with the subject line "Action Required." I ignored the last one. The deed was still on the bed. I laid the loan documents beside it, side by side, like evidence. And then I pulled out the same blue pen I used to sign Grayson's field trip forms his first driver's license application, the lease on his college apartment. That pen had followed me through years of small permissions. Today, I used it to sign something final. I signed the release. No hesitation. No notes. I scanned it, emailed it back, and waited. Brad called again within the hour. We've received your release. Thank you, Ms. Rowan. Foreclosure will proceed. I said nothing. I didn't ask for a receipt. I didn't ask what would happen next. I didn't want the details. I already knew. They'd wake up to a notice they didn't see coming. They'd scramble, call lawyers, call banks, call me. And when none of those worked, they'd resort to panic. But I would be gone by then. I closed the laptop, folded the documents, and placed them back in the folder. Then I stood and walked to the mirror above the dresser. My reflection didn't look proud, or angry, or broken. Just done. Grayson had bet the house without blinking. Peyton had locked the fridge, moved the Wi-Fi, whispered plans for the nursery. Together they thought I was soft, convenient, removable. They were wrong. They'd taken my silence for weakness, my kindness for currency. But they forgot I'd already given them everything. And now I had nothing left to lose. The folder went back under the pillow. I turned off the lamp. And I waited. The motel printer whirred slowly, its gears sticking on the second page, like it needed a moment to think. I stood over it, one hand resting on the counter, the other holding the flash drive like it was something fragile. By the time the first copy of the deed slid into the tray, my shoulders had dropped an inch. I printed 5 in total. 1 for me, 1 for a lawyer if it came to that, 1 for the lender, 1 for my records, and 1 in case someone tried to rewrite the truth. I didn't know yet who that last one would be for. Each page was clean, crisp, not a stain or smudge. I tucked them into plastic sleeves, slid them into a manila folder, and used the same blue pen from the night before to write a label across the tab. Wexford Property Co-Ownership. No emotion. Just fact. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about being ready. I didn't want to fight. I didn't even want them to suffer. That was the part no one ever understood about people like me. Mothers who gave everything. We don't crave retribution. We crave clarity. We crave someone just once saying you were right to draw the line. But they never say it, so you write it down instead. I bought a small lockbox at a convenience store 2 blocks from the motel. The cashier didn't even blink when I asked for the kind that couldn't be pried open with a butter knife. I paid in cash. No receipt. Back in the room, I placed the folder inside and clicked the latch closed. That sound, a soft, clean snap, felt like more than security. It felt like an answer to a question no one had thought to ask. I left the lockbox under the bed wrapped in a motel towel. Then I took the pen and sat at the desk again. My notebook waited still, open to the page where I'd written, "You raised him, but you weren't invited." Below it, I started a new list. Deed 5 copies made. Release form signed. Lender notified. Legal backup pending. Stay silent. Stay still. Stay ready. The pen paused between each line, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted to feel the weight of the ink on paper. There was something final about it. Not angry, not righteous. Just resolved. By evening, I had memorized every line of the deed. By nightfall, I had stopped waiting for the phone to ring. I poured a cup of motel coffee, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the door. Not in fear, not in dread, but with the certainty that when it finally knocked, I'd be holding the truth. The first text came from a woman I barely remembered, a distant cousin who still signed her Christmas cards with glitter pens and Bible verses. "Linda, are you okay?" I saw Megan's post. "Praying for you all." I didn't respond. The second came from my old neighbor Maureen. "Saw something about your house online. Call me if you want to talk." I didn't call. Then the flood started. My niece sent a screenshot. Megan's name at the top, a long caption below a photo of their front porch. "Urgent. Our home is being taken from us by someone we trusted. If anyone knows a good real estate attorney, please message me. We're being scammed." Scammed. That was the word she chose. The photo was taken at just the right angle, sunlight behind her. The porch, tidy flowers blooming in the pots. I helped plant that first spring. You'd think it was a family drama. Some cruel injustice playing out against a sweet, tired mother trying to protect her home. The comments were worse. Sending love. "You don't deserve this. Some people are just bitter. File a restraining order, Megan. You're doing the right thing. I know you opened your home to her. She's clearly unwell." I scrolled quietly, sitting in the motel with my notebook open beside me and the folder locked beneath the bed. Grayson commented too. A photo of us. Me and him back when he was 5, covered in ice cream. Both of us laughing. He captioned it. "It's hard when the people who raised you end up hurting you the most." Not tagged. No names. Just enough implication to let the crowd run wild. And they did. I watched people build a narrative around a woman they'd never met. A woman who'd cooked every meal in that house for 6 months. A woman who paid the down payment they never mentioned. A woman who never raised her voice, never posted her side, never begged to be seen. Because I didn't. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have the proof. Not because I couldn't burn their version of events to the ground in 3 lines and a document scan. But because I had learned something long ago, the person who speaks first gets to control the tone. The person who waits gets to control the ending. So I let Megan cry in pastel Instagram stories. I let Grayson frame his silence like grief. I let the strangers scroll sympathize and comment from behind their screens. And I sat in silence with my truth locked in a box. It was louder than anything they posted. Because silence, when chosen, is not weakness. It's a warning. And I was done warning. It was almost time to move. The voicemail came just after 10:00 a.m. No caller ID. Just a buzz, then silence. When I played it back, Grayson's voice was low and shaking, like he was trying to stay angry, but didn't have the strength to finish the job. I don't know what you did, but we're out. Gone. You ruined us, Mom. I hope you're happy. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just blame like I had flipped a switch. He wired himself and he was shocked the lights went out. I played it twice, then deleted it. 2 hours later, Peyton sent a text. No emojis, no hashtags, just raw and short. If you wanted to hurt us, congrats. We have nothing. I just hope you sleep well tonight. You destroyed your family. I stared at the screen for a long time. Your family, not our family. Not the family. Your family. As if I'd somehow set fire to something they weren't standing in with a lit match and a smug smile. As if I'd dismantled a home instead of just stepping outside of it. I didn't respond. I turned my phone face down and poured another cup of coffee, stale, burnt motel brew, but still hot. I sat at the tiny table by the window watching a woman walk her dog across the parking lot. She wore slippers and no bra hair piled on her head like she'd stopped caring what people thought a long time ago. I envied that. Back when I still believed love could smooth things over, I might have responded to Peyton's message. I might have tried to explain myself, to tell her about the deed, the money, the padlock on the fridge, the Wi-Fi password that kept changing. But that woman no longer lived here. What lived here now was someone they didn't know how to handle. Someone who stopped making dinner for people who never came to the table. Someone who no longer softened her voice to ask for basic respect. Someone who didn't answer texts meant to punish. They hadn't expected me to stay quiet this long. But more than that, they hadn't expected silence to be so complete. Later that afternoon, I opened my notebook again. On the next page, I wrote, "They only call it destruction when they can't control the outcome." Then I turned the page and started writing down where I would go next. It was Sunday afternoon, and I was still in my pajama pants halfway through a lukewarm cup of peppermint tea when the knock came. I didn't move at first, just listened. 3 soft taps, then silence. I stood slowly and checked the peephole. Peyton, hair messier than usual, eyes puffy. One arm cradled a baby swaddled in a pale pink blanket. The other clutched a diaper bag slung over her shoulder, soft beige with gold zippers and too many compartments. She looked like every influencer mom I'd ever scrolled past, disheveled but polished, sad, but camera ready. She didn't knock again, just spoke. "Callista, please. We don't know what to do anymore. Josh is falling apart. We got kicked out of the rental, we failed the credit check. Please, can I come in?" I opened the door an inch. Her eyes caught mine immediately. Red, wet, but practiced. The baby let out a faint, fussy cry, more a whimper than a wail. "Her name's Emily Peyton," said softly. "She's yours too. Don't shut us out." I opened the door wider and stepped back. She entered like a guest in someone else's motel room, polite, uncertain, surveying the space for rules unspoken. "You still like it cold in here, huh?" she said, trying for a smile. I said nothing. She sat carefully at the edge of the bed, bouncing the baby slightly. "We really screwed up," she said. "I said things I didn't mean. We were scared. Stupid. Josh is too proud to admit it, but we're drowning." I watched her closely. Her lips trembled, her voice cracked in just the right places. And then I saw it. The tag, still attached to the diaper bag. Retail logo, bright and bold, posh baby. One of those designer lines I'd seen in glossy catalogs in the motel lobby. The kind you register for when you expect other people to fund your parenting. My eyes drifted to the side pocket. A black lens. Small, round, just barely visible between the folds. She hadn't come to apologize. She'd come to capture the apology. I stood, walked slowly to the window, and glanced down. A sleek black SUV idled at the curb. New, not desperate. You came here to get something I said without turning. She flinched. I came here to ask for help. No. You came here to film something. I turned fast. Where is it? What are you talking about? Your phone purse. Whatever it is, you're recording this. Her mouth opened, then closed. We just wanted proof, she whispered, in case you tried to twist things. I stared at her. Get out, I said. Callista now. She rose slowly, clutching the baby close. She's your granddaughter. No, I said. She's your daughter. Raise her better than you treat people. She left, and I stood in the middle of the room, hands shaking, not from fear, but fury. Controlled, measured, cold, because they hadn't come for redemption. They'd come for content, and I'd given them none. She hesitated at the doorway, still holding the baby like a prop she didn't know how to use. She's your granddaughter. Peyton said again. Quieter this time. Eyes glassy. I stepped forward. Not rushed, just close enough to lower my voice without losing the edge. No, I said. She's your daughter. And I suggest you raise her better than this performance? Peyton's face hardened. This wasn't a performance. You walked into a motel room with a $900 diaper bag, a running camera, and a speech, I replied. You didn't come for forgiveness. You came for footage. She blinked fast, still trying to find the right expression, but I had no more patience for the theater. Take your bag, your camera, and your manipulation. Get out before I call the front desk or the police. Still, she didn't move. So I opened the door myself. Let me be clear, Peyton. I'm not your storyline. I'm not your villain. And I'm damn sure not your ATM. She stepped out, stiff and slow. The baby stirred again, just a soft breath of movement in the blanket. And for a moment, I did feel something. Not softness, not pity, just exhaustion. Exhaustion that they thought I could be used even now. As she crossed the parking lot, I saw her climb into the SUV without looking back. A man was behind the wheel. Grayson, maybe. Or someone else ready to edit the next scene. Either way, I shut the door and locked it tight. Then I picked up my notebook and wrote the words down slowly and without trembling. They brought a baby to bait me into breaking. I didn't. After that, I walked to the front desk, asked for the address of the nearest courthouse, and called a cab. The woman behind the plexiglass didn't ask questions. She just circled it on a map and slid it through the opening in silence. An hour later, I stood in line at the courthouse with a stack of papers in my tote and the weight of too many months in my chest. When it was my turn, I stepped up to the clerk's desk and said simply, I'd like to file for a restraining order. Domestic, she asked. Something like that. I filled out the forms carefully, every name, every incident, every message. I included the texts, the voicemail, a photo of the designer bag with the tag still attached, and the lens. I hadn't removed it. I'd simply photographed it before I tossed the whole thing in the motel trash. When I slid everything forward, the clerk didn't blink. You're not the first, she said. You won't be the last. She stamped the top page and told me I'd get confirmation within 48 hours. I thanked her, tucked the receipt into my notebook, and walked out into the September heat without once looking over my shoulder. Back in the motel, I opened the safe box and added the new documents to the stack. My folder was growing thick, not from rage, but from receipts. I was no longer defending myself. I was archiving the truth. That night, I slept with the restraining order tucked beneath my pillow. Not because I feared them coming back, but because I wanted to be ready when they did. The envelope slid under my door early that morning, thick official stamped with the county seal. My restraining order had been approved. Pages stapled together in triplicate, each one affirming what I already knew: I wasn't dangerous. I was done. I made 5 copies again. 1 for the motel office, 1 for the local precinct, 1 for Doreen at the housing board, 1 for my lockbox, and 1 I mailed directly to their last known address, unsigned, unaccompanied, except for a single yellow sticky note on top. You wanted legal. You got it. Then I opened my laptop and found the email I'd been sitting on for a week. Charlotte Local Magazine. Subject request for interview. Community spotlight. I clicked reply and attached every file I had. The deed, the wire transfer for the $180,000, the foreclosure notice from the lender, the screenshots of their texts, the photo of Peyton's designer diaper bag tag still dangling. No commentary, no summary, just the subject line. Let's talk, since they did. The editor called the next morning. Her voice was sharp but kind, the kind that didn't flinch when someone told her the unpolished version of a story. We believe you, she said. Would you be willing to go on record? I said yes, under one condition. My quote goes at the top, one line. This isn't revenge. This is clarity. She agreed. The piece ran the following Sunday. 3 pages printed wide with a full-color photo of a closed front door and a headline that made something in my chest unlock. When help becomes. Leverage one mother's account of financial betrayal. They didn't dress it up. They didn't water it down. They didn't flip the script to sell ads. They told it straight: dates, figures, screenshots. It wasn't gossip. It was documentation. It didn't go viral. It didn't crash their site. But it rippled. People in the neighborhood began commenting publicly. The same Facebook group where Peyton had sobbed through a 10-slide story now debated inheritance rights and the ethics of multi-generational housing. My name was no longer a whisper. It was a question. Had anyone bothered to ask her side? Grayson didn't respond directly. He never mentioned me. But 2 days later, he posted a photo him alone at a coffee shop, hoodie, up chin in hand, captioned, "Healing takes time." Some things you just don't see coming. The sympathy flooded in. You're strong. She doesn't deserve your pain. Family is supposed to protect, not destroy. And still, I said nothing. I didn't explain. I didn't rebut. I just saved a screenshot, printed it, filed it behind the article, because that photo wasn't a cry for healing. It was a reminder of how well he played the part. But this time, I'd already written the ending. He showed up without calling. No flowers this time. No apology script. Just Grayson standing outside the motel room in yesterday's clothes, holding a manila folder like it was his last bargaining chip. I watched him through the peephole for a full minute before opening the door an inch. 5 minutes, I said. He nodded like a child being handed a consequence instead of a gift. We sat across from each other at the tiny round table, the same one where I had sorted foreclosure documents and folded motel pamphlets for nearby rentals. He didn't make eye contact at first, just exhaled hard and rested his arms on the table. I messed up, he said. I didn't respond. I know I should have told you about the loan. I shouldn't have let Peyton talk to you the way she did. I panicked. Still, I said nothing. I watched him shift, recalibrate. He was searching for the version of himself that might still work on me. The little boy, the wounded adult, the new father. He tried them all in 5 seconds. She's pregnant, he added. Like that changed the math. We were scared. I looked at him, then really looked. There were dark circles under his eyes, tension in his jaw. But what I noticed most was that he'd come empty-handed, except for the folder. I didn't come to fight, he said. I need you to sign something. He opened the folder and slid a paper across the table. Just something to help us negotiate with the lender. It's nothing major. Just to move things forward. I read it once. Then again. Legal jargon woven like a net. It wasn't just permission to talk to the bank. It was partial power of attorney. Limited, but not small. Enough to give him access to manage the foreclosure process, which meant the accounts, which meant my share, which meant my name. I set the paper down slowly. He looked up. Hopeful. Get out, I said. His face shifted surprise, then disbelief. Mom out. He stood like a man who still thought he could salvage it with one more line, one more appeal to something soft in me. We're going to lose the baby's future mom. I looked him straight in the eye. You already did. He left without another word. I waited until the door clicked shut and the footsteps faded before I locked it twice, and stood there until the shaking in my hands settled. Then I pulled my notebook from the drawer, flipped to a clean page, and wrote, "Still your mom, not your fool." And for the first time in months, I finally exhaled. Doreen's email came on a Thursday morning subject line. "You've been approved." I didn't open it right away. I made my coffee first slow and deliberate the way I liked it. No one hovering behind me. No one sighing at the thermostat. Just me and the sound of the kettle clicking off. When I finally clicked into the message, the listing was right there on the first page, a 2-bedroom condo near Wilmington. Second floor. Ocean air. Senior discount applied. Rent within my pension range. Move-in date the following Friday. I stared at the words for a long time, not because I didn't believe them, but because I did. It wasn't just a roof or a floor plan. It was a door no one else had a key to. I packed everything that night, my suitcase, the lockbox, the photo of Ellis. I left the motel microwave clean and the coffee pot empty. Before I checked out, I left a thank you card at the front desk. Nothing sentimental, just gratitude for the space. The drive to Wilmington was long and quiet. I didn't turn on music. I didn't call anyone. I just watched the trees blur past and let the silence fill in all the places I used to leave room for their voices. The condo was smaller than I expected, but brighter. The sunlight came in through the wide windows and stretched across the laminate floors like it belonged there. I stood in the middle of the living room and listened. No footsteps above me. No TV blaring from the next room. No one asking what was for dinner. Just space. My space. I unpacked slowly, drawer by drawer, cabinet by cabinet. I filled the fridge with things I actually wanted. I bought a plant from the roadside stand on the corner and placed it near the window where the breeze touched its leaves. I walked to the beach the next morning, sand between my toes, and stood still long enough to let the ocean say hello. I didn't tell anyone where I'd gone. Instead, I called my lawyer. We updated the will. Grayson's name came off cleanly, quietly, without ceremony. In his place, I named 3 organizations: a local domestic abuse shelter, the literacy program I used to volunteer for, and an animal rescue that had once helped me find a cat for a grieving neighbor. Nothing flashy. Nothing for show. Just people and places that wouldn't turn my help into leverage. When the updated draft came through, I signed it without hesitation. Then I scanned it, saved a copy in the lockbox, and mailed one to the lawyer with a final instruction. If he ever contests this, send them everything. Publicly. No more drafts. No more compromises. This wasn't a warning. This was the rebuild. And I wasn't leaving room for anyone to collapse it again. The envelope was hand-addressed, postmarked from a P.O. box somewhere outside Charlotte. No return name, but I knew the handwriting. Grayson's still messy after all these years, slanted, like he was always in a hurry even when he had nowhere to be. Inside was one sheet of paper folded in half. No greeting, no apology, no signature. Just 4 lines written in blue ink. I know I can't undo what I did. I don't expect anything from you. I just want you to know I'm trying. We named her Emily Linda Carter. I read it once, then again. Not slowly, not with trembling hands, just steadily. Like reading instructions you already knew you wouldn't follow. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just folded the paper in thirds and slipped it into the drawer beneath the lockbox, the same one that held the deed, the foreclosure notice, the court documents, and the printouts of their social media posts. Truths stacked neatly. It was strange, the things people thought could heal a wound. A name, a gesture, a few lines scratched in ink. As if calling her Emily, Linda Carter erased the weeks of gaslighting. As if honoring me in ink justified erasing me in real life. She wasn't a peace offering. She was a person. And she'd spend her life growing up with a name that echoed mine without ever knowing the weight of it. Or maybe one day she would. Maybe one day she'd Google the article. Maybe she'd find the headline and ask the question, why is my middle name attached to someone you called dangerous? I didn't hate her. I couldn't. She didn't ask to be born into a mess her parents made and tried to film their way out of. But I also didn't feel honored. I felt like someone they were trying to pull back into the story without ever apologizing for how they wrote me out of it. I sat with that letter in silence for the better part of an hour, letting it settle like dust on an untouched shelf. Then I got up. I opened the balcony door, let the ocean air into the condo, and brewed a fresh pot of coffee. Strong black, just the way Ellis used to drink it. I took my cup out to the balcony and stared at the horizon, not looking for answers, just letting the noise fall away. They wanted me to feel something from that letter. And I did. Just not what they expected. Not guilt. Not softness. Not pride. Just clarity. They still didn't understand me. And they never would. I stayed out there until the sun slipped low, a warm streak of gold crawling across the porch floor. When the breeze picked up, I closed the door gently and poured the rest of the coffee into the sink. Then I returned to the drawer, took out my notebook, and wrote the final line of the day, "A name is not an apology." And in the quiet that followed, I heard the waves again just beyond the windows crashing soft and sure like clockwork. I stood still long enough to hear them twice. Then I turned off the light and began packing the last of the motel boxes for the recycling bin. I drank my coffee on the balcony that morning. Black, still hot, no sugar. I sat cross-legged in the old wicker chair that came with the condo, facing the railing, watching the breeze lift the tops of the trees like a quiet warning before rain. The ocean was out of sight, but not out of reach. I could hear it distant, but steady, like it had something to say, but didn't need me to answer. It was the sound of permanence. I hadn't spoken to anyone in days. Not Doreen, not the lawyer, not the church ladies who used to loop me in on group texts about bake sales and Bible verses. I'd silenced every notification, turned off read receipts, archived every attempt to pull me back into the orbit I'd broken free from. I didn't need to explain anymore. I didn't need to argue or defend or prove anything. The story had already run. The truth already printed. And Emily, well, she had her name now. That was all they could take without permission. I sipped slowly, letting the mug warm my palms. No one was coming. No surprise knocks. No pleading messages. Even the silence felt different now, not empty, but whole. Like it wasn't absence, but boundary. I'd started filling the days with things I never used to make time for. Long walks down the boardwalk. Grocery runs where I chose food for me, not for someone else's dinner schedule. I bought a second plant. A journal with linen binding. I even signed up for a watercolor class with a local instructor who wore suspenders and told jokes that didn't land but remembered my name by the second day. I didn't talk about Grayson, or Peyton, or the baby they'd tried to weaponize. The past wasn't a secret, but it wasn't an introduction either. I'd stopped leading with wounds, and somewhere in that quiet rebuild, I stopped flinching. Stopped glancing at my phone every time it buzzed. Stopped wondering if forgiveness was something owed or earned. The final text came late that evening. Unknown number. Just 4 words. We lost everything. Congrats. I stared at it for a moment. Then I deleted it without opening the thread. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood that caring didn't mean returning. It didn't mean reopening doors that were better left closed. And it certainly didn't mean offering space to people who only showed up to take. I set my phone face down on the kitchen counter and stepped back out onto the balcony. The mug was still warm in my hands. The wind was softer now, and in a voice I hadn't used in months, steady low without any bite, I said aloud to no one. No space here either. Goodbye. I didn't mean the condo. I meant the version of me they thought would wait forever. And as the sky dimmed and the waves continued their rhythm in the distance, I leaned back in the chair, closed my eyes, and let the breeze move through me like something earned. Not by noise, but by finally walking away without needing them to notice.